All right, I see our folks starting to join. Welcome, everybody. This is Saran Sidime, PPIA's Communications and Outreach Manager. I'm gonna just let you all, I can see my stream, the folks just coming in in the attendee room. That's great. Welcome, everyone. Awesome. I'm gonna just give us a couple of minutes for you all to join us. As we get bearing, we've got a really exciting webinar ready today for you all. So I'm excited to get this started soon. Welcome, thank you. And the Q&A should be enabled if you just want to tell us your name and where you're joining us from, and if you are a PPIA alum or an early professional looking for some pointers, just let us know who is in the room so that we could also welcome you. And we'll be doing Q&As at the end as well. We'll have a panel ready for you before we transition into some of the questions that you all might have. So feel free to just tap in, put in the chat, the questions that you might have while before we get started. Welcome. Just gonna give like one more minute to the folks who are just who just saw my post on Instagram to join us. Just gonna give you a second to join. For folks who just joined us, we are using the Q&A right now. The Q&A function for questions you might have. You'll have opportunities to ask questions live directly to our panelists a little bit later as we move through the webinar. But I'm going to go ahead and begin. I think everybody's here and folks can always join us later on. But my name is Saran Sidime. I'm PPIA Communications and Outreach Manager. I'm really excited to welcome all of you today. And of course, with our alumni and staff members of the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Yes, I'm gonna go ahead actually and introduce one of our panel moderator, Justine Lazaro. Justine manages the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, that's DEI, it's a mouthful, training and programming for GAO's Learning Center. And she oversees the DEI facilitator program. Prior to her role, she spent over a decade in the Homeland Security and Justice and International Affairs and Trade Mission teams, where she led teams and made significant contributions to GAO's work on aid to conflict areas, democracy assistance, foreign investment, human trafficking, intelligence, and territorial economies. Ooh, I'm tired just reading up. Justine is a PPIA alumna, very exciting. She completed her junior summer institute in 2006 at the Goldman School of Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley, where she returned and obtained a master's in public policy in 2009. Justine, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to you. Please take it from here. Oh, I think you are still on mute.
I'm sorry, there we go. Thank you so much, Saran, for that introduction. And also for just organizing these really important events for PPIA. As a PPIA alumni, I really appreciate that. It was an event just like this one that I got introduced to GAO. So I, definitely feel that PPIA is the reason I have a federal career. And it's why I'm here today. So appreciate you and the rest of the PPIA National Office. Virtual round of applause for all of them. But before we jump into our panel, which I'm super excited about, we have some of my favorite humans on this panel today. I want to just share with you a little about the GAO in case you're unfamiliar, which is totally fine. We're all here to learn, or maybe you just need a refresher. So we are a congressional agency. We're part of the legislative branch. You might have heard of our sister agencies, the Congressional Budget Office, or CBO for short, in the Congressional Research Service, or CRS for short. We are Congress's investigative arm. You might have heard us referred to in the media as the congressional watchdog, but really what we do is we look at how federal programs and policies are being implemented and how taxpayer dollars, your money, is being spent. So just a quick fact here is that $75 billion in financial benefits were found by GAO just last fiscal year, and over 1,200 additional other benefits that led to improvements across the entire government. So it's also important to note so that we are independent. I think that's very important in this day and age. We are nonpartisan. Based on facts and facts alone, that's how we advise Congress about ways to make government more efficient, more effective, more ethical, and more equitable. And so that equitable piece, I think, is really, really important. So I have to, shameless plug. So in addition to being #1 among mid-sized federal agencies through the Partnership for Public Services Best Places to Work rankings, GAO is really a leader in diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. Like Saran says, it's a mouthful, so I'll call it DIA for short. But it's really no surprise, right, that GAO has had this long time partnership with PPIA. It's over 25 years and counting. So we have a very strong network of PPIA alumni at GAO, and that includes our amazing panelists that we have here today. So let's get started by meeting our panelists, and we will start with you, Terri. If you can share with us a little bit about yourself, your current role, other roles maybe you've had at GAO, and your PPIA affiliation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justine. Thank you, Saran, as well. I am so excited to be here today. One of the best things I love is interacting with the PPIA program, interacting with PPIA participants, future, current, past, because it's such an impressive community. So thank you so much for having me here today. As Justine said, I currently am working at the Government Accountability Office and have spent my whole 34-year career at GAO, which when I say that every time, it's a surprise to me because I never expected that I would stay at the same agency for that long. I am a PPIA alum. I was in the Junior Summer Institute, and I think you had me go first because I'm probably go back the longest, back in 1987, and attended the LBJ School of Public Affairs, Junior Summer Institute, and actually ended up going to graduate school at the LBJ School as well. I did not attend the Senior Institute because I did have the opportunity to join the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute in a fellowship there. So I went there before I went on to graduate school at the LBJ School. So what have I done at GAO? I've had some incredible opportunities at this organization. I started out as an analyst, similar to Justine, in our Dallas field office, where I worked on a multitude of issues, including groundwater contamination issues, juvenile justice issues, access to internet in public schools, healthcare for veterans. It was just a very, very wide range of issues. I spent a large portion of my time working on troubled public housing authorities as well, and did a lot of field work in that area. Some of the best work I think that when I look back on my GAO career felt was the most impactful. After being in the analyst role for some time, I switched over to our operations side, where I worked in helping to manage our Atlanta field office. GAO has 11 field offices throughout the country. And then got my senior executive service appointment while I was working in our field operations. From there, I switched over to, for about 10 years, helping manage our entry-level professional development program. So I was responsible, I was the hiring official for the agency for all of our entry-level hires, which we would love to talk with any of you who are interested at any time. And just recently, right before the pandemic hit, went back to field operations where my current position is, which is managing director of our field operations, where I have management responsibilities, like I said, for those 11 field offices, and about 1/3 of GAO staff right now are located in our field locations, with the remaining in our headquarters building. I am physically located in our headquarters building, but we work very much virtually with our staff in all of our 11 locations. So that's an introduction to me. I will turn it over, Justine, back to you.
Thanks so much, Terri. All right, Ashanta.
Thanks, Justine. And I too am looking forward to today's session. I've been at GAO, gosh, it's crazy how time goes by so fast, but almost 19 years come this August. And similar to Justine, I think I found out about GAO through an event like this, where people came to share information about what is it that GAO does. And so at GAO, I've worked on a range of issues. I started out as an analyst. I also had some career transitions as well. I started out as an analyst looking at different issues in our education, workforce, and income security team. And then I sort of transitioned now into a GAO's training center with Justine, making sure that our staff at hand, have the skills that they need to go about conducting our audit work. I did my PPIA, I want to say in 2002 at Berkeley. I'm originally from the Bay Area, so endless plug there. But I'm in GAO's headquarters office, located in Washington, D.C. Occasionally, I will make it back, to our Oakland field office when I'm on that side visiting family. In terms of, just other things about my background, went to Syracuse University. I have a background both in social work as well as public administration. I was more interested in the policy side of things, and that's sort of why I was interested in GAO. And I'll stop right there and maybe turn it over to Jose to share his experience.
Thanks, Ashanta. And thanks, Saran, for organizing this great event. It wasn't too long ago that I was a PPIA student at my JSI, and it's just great to be able to share a bit more about where I am now. So yeah, my name's Jose Altamirano. I am an analyst at GAO in the professional development program. I've been at GAO since last August, so relatively recently. Also based in DC headquarters and currently working in the natural resources and environment team. And I did my JSI in 2016 at Carnegie Mellon, CMU. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to all of you. So whenever we welcome our PPIA alumni to GAO, I always love hearing all the different pathways from JSI to GAO, right? Sometimes it's linear, straight out of school. Other times we've had some maybe different career paths. So curious if you could also, share your pathway from JSI, if you will, to GAO, but also why GAO, out of everywhere you could have gone, why GAO? So this time, let's start with Ashanta.
Yeah, so when I was in school, I think I started out in social work. And mainly at that time, I was focused on clinical, but through some of my social work field placements, I recognized that I was more interested in the policy side of things. I was doing a field placement at the Syracuse Housing Authority and felt that I was more interested in the policies that shaped, the day-to-day lives of tenants. And so after I finished my social work degree, I went back and was really interested in that policy angle. And so as I was pursuing the policy angle, I think, that's sort of where I was looking at different organizations that did some of that work. I think having attended an event like this, I don't know if, well, I won't say it hadn't, because I will say a lot of my professors at Syracuse, they would always hold up GAO's report, as an example. And so I think that was the first introduction. But like at an event like this, where we actually had a chance to ask questions, there were other events, where GAO staff would do case studies to really bring, people interested in a career at GAO into the type of work that we do to really understand the day-to-day. And so after going through both of those experiences, I think it was like, wow, this is, they're speaking my language. They have portfolios of work that deal with social issues. And so, as mentioned, I came from the team that dealt a lot with education issues, workforce issues, veteran issues. And so those were all different portfolios of work that I had a personal interest in. I consider myself a generalist, a person with multiple interests. And so the fact that I could work on a lot of different issue areas was also a very appealing to me, and important issue areas to even students. Part of the education work was looking at higher education, be it student loans, how schools are accredited. There were like for-profit organizations, that were closing, students being strapped with loans. And so, that really brought like an in-person experience, like more relevant coming home. And so I appreciated the work from that angle. But that's how I got interested in GAO and sort of my career path.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashanta. Thanks for all the work you've done for us with, student loans. It's a really important issue. And Jose, if you could share with us a little bit about, why GAO and how you got here.
Absolutely. So I think you said it best, Justine, when you introduced the panel, which is, I think you said that, PPIA is part of the reason why you're at GAO today. And I think that's definitely the case for me. I think my experience at my JSI really opened my eyes to not just the value of a career in public service, including a GAO, but also like how accessible it can be for someone like me. And after undergrad, I worked in politics, I worked in higher ed, I worked in nonprofit advocacy, but in the back of my head was always public service. And it wasn't until I got to grad school a few years ago where through coursework, through talking to my professors, extracurricular opportunities, that kind of demystified the process of a career in public service. And that led me to applying for an internship at GAO. So I interned in the fall of 2022. I was placed in the strategic issues mission team, and I looked at my team looked at the impact of the CARES Act in the permanently inhabited territories. And that experience was, I think, phenomenal. And it really kind of cemented for me the decision to, come back to GAO full time after graduation. Not just because of the work, it was really impactful work, looking at, populations that are often overlooked in public policy and national discourses, but also because of the great team environment I was with. My team were great to work with. I was an intern, but I was taken as seriously as a full-time analyst. And I just had a great experience working with the folks that I was placed with during my internship. And speaking more broadly, I think now that I've been at GAO for a couple of months, it's only been, it's been relatively early, but I've really enjoyed my experience so far working at an agency that directly impacts public policy by, helping deliver better government services for taxpayers and the American people. And, my experience as an intern, as far as team culture, has been reaffirmed as a full-time employee. I think I have a great experience with my current team and through both my direct engagement and through the professional development program.
Thanks so much, Jose. And we're so happy that you returned to GAO. So Terri, if you can share a little bit about, after the LBJ school, and also why GAO.
Sure. So I'm just going to back up just a little bit, Justine, because I just cannot tell you enough how much PPIA has impacted where I am today and what an important role the program played in my life. When I was an undergrad at Texas A&M University, I had no just even motivation to even think about graduate school. I mean, it just was not in my realm. Just from financial situation, I had to get my degree, get out, and go work. And being part of affinity groups at my university, being very involved in it, that's how I heard about this mystical PPIA thing and decided to apply and was selected to be part of the Junior Institute. And it just completely changed my perspective on everything. So I mentioned that I did a CHCI internship after my Junior Institute. I graduated, like, it took me an additional semester to get my undergraduate degree. So I graduated in December. I had that time, CHCI fit great. And that's where I first heard about GAO, because I was working for Senator Kennedy's education and labor staff. And part of my role was helping put together briefing books for hearings and things like that. And I kept coming across, they were like, look at GAO, get a GAO report. That'll help you do it. And so that's how I learned about GAO. So then when I got accepted into the LBJ program, once there, I know that my experience at PPIA and the Junior Institute actually gave me a path forward to be offered a Barbara Jordan Fellowship. And that was huge. If I had not done PPIA, I don't think I would have gotten that opportunity or been selected actually for that fellowship. So it really did help me a lot. I worked full time while I was in graduate school. And I started working my second year for this group called the Texas Research League, which is no longer there in Texas for those of you who are joining us from Texas, anybody out there. But they were very similar to GAO in that they got private sector funding to try and make the state of Texas government work better. So very similar to GAO, has to be independent, you know, and I did a ton of work in the education policy area, including trying to figuring out school financing models for the state legislature. So then GAO came to LBJ and they were recruiting. And at the time when I was in GAO, in graduate school, GAO was not as connected with PPIA or doing some of the fabulous things that you heard we do now, you know, and having those connections, doing the, Summer Institute and things like that. But GAO came to interview and I was like, oh, why not? I'll decide an interview, because I had already in my mind said, I'm going to keep working for the Texas Research League. I like what they do. And I got offered a position and I went to my boss and I said, you know, I got offered this position by GAO, but I really want to keep working for you. I want to stay here. I feel like I'm making a big impact. He looked me in the eye and said, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? You need to go to GAO. First of all, they're going to pay you more. Secondly, they're going to teach you things that I can never teach you here. Go work there a couple of years and then come back here and come work for us. And at the time, my thinking was, I wanted to be kind of like a bigger fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. And what I mean by that is I felt like at the federal government level, I really didn't think I could have an impact or see that firsthand impact to the work I do making changes. And as I kept working at GAO, I found that I was wrong about that. You know, GAO does have opportunities that even though we're working on that broader stage and we have that connection with our clients in Congress, and where you may not see things impacting right away, there were definite experiences that I had in working at the agency where I saw that we were making impact. The second thing that attracted me to GAO and actually kept me here is just the high learning curve working at GAO. I think one of the best kept secrets about GAO is that once you finish an engagement, finish working on something, it kind of ends and you get to work with a complete different group of people on a complete different topic. And you're never an expert on these things. What you're an expert on is learning how to get behind the questions that were asked, learning how to think, learning how to communicate, learning how to develop different ways to get information. And it's just been an incredible career for me. Even when I switched to the operations side, that learning curve, high learning curve never went away. So that's been, my experience. I said I was going to be here 3 to 5 years. Like I said, I'm here 34 years later. And those are the main reasons, besides the great people at GAO. I cannot not get past saying that. Just really good, incredible people that challenge you every day. You get to work with in partnership. Those are the main things why I've stayed at GAO and what got me here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terri. So it sounds like, and I would agree with this, the people are a main reason, the actual work in this idea of learning, right? And these skills that we pick up at GAO. So on that note, I know it has been a while for some of us since we did our PPIA Junior Summer Institute, but wondering if you can share with us which skills, courses, that the PPIA GSI program, what you found most helpful preparing you for your time at GAO or even your career path in general. So Jose, since it hasn't been as long for you, how about we start with you?
Absolutely. I actually, right before this panel, I checked my CMU JSI transcript, and it was a total blast from the past, a really pleasant one. So yeah, I think out of the courses I took at my JSI, the one that I think, looking back, really prepared me for this role or this career at GAO is there was a course called Environmental Policy, Politics, and Justice. And it was a series of case studies that we looked at, and we had to analyze the causes of these environmental disasters or instances of environmental racism, and kind of synthesize from different sources kind of what happened, what were the proposed policy solutions, what ended up happening in real life, so on and so forth. I think that kind of course, that was a holistic, multidisciplinary, that included, components like researching and writing a report, delivering a presentation to your classmate of peers. I think that contain the skills that make for a successful GAO analyst or just successful GAO employee. I also think outside of like the coursework, my interactions with my cohort at my JSI were really important to prepare me for practically everything I've done after college. I think that social component of meeting people from across the country, learning new perspectives, new ways of thinking that you may not be accustomed to, new ways of looking at things, new ways of thinking about issues that everyone has thought about. I think that's really important. And JSI, you're with a cohort that is from many different places nationwide. And I think that's really important, especially looking back in the spaces that I've been after my JSI. And I think, speaking to folks that might be, coming off grad school or undergrad or their JSI or just a few years removed, I would say any coursework where you're practicing, maybe not like essay writing, but report writing, memo writing, writing for an audience, any course where you get to take different sources of information and determine what is reliable, what's not, condense it into something that is easily digestible. These are all really important skills that have served me well at my time in GAO so far, and I'm sure for many others.
Thank you so much, Jose. How about you, Terri? What did you find to be the most helpful from your Junior Summer Institute?
Okay, so I'm going to admit I don't remember much about the coursework. I just remember that it was very challenging, good, and exciting courses that I took. 1987 was a long time ago, but in general, what I do absolutely remember about the value of my JSI Institute was some of the things that Jose just mentioned. Just being able to communicate, work with individuals who were kind of had the similar interests, were like-minded, had similar challenges as I did, in trying to even think about pursuing a graduate degree or pursuing a career in public service. I grew up in a somewhat small town, Brownsville, Texas, born and raised there. It was a big deal going to Texas A&M, even though it was in the same state, was like going to Mars for my parents. And so just having that, it was such a confidence boost. I remember it was such a confidence boost to be able to say, no, you don't have to go right away and get a job that may not be what it is that you really want to do with your life. You have options, you have choices, you have the ability to make your voice heard, and there's other people out there like you. That was just the most important thing about that I remember to this day about my experiences with the JSI.
Thank you, Terri. All right. And Ashanta, how about you?
And I think similar to Terri, I don't remember the names of the specific classes, but I think one of my favorite was the policy analysis class. And I think there, gaining both quantitative and qualitative skills definitely prepared me for the work I do at GAO. When we're given a request by Congress to take a look at a certain issue, oftentimes I rely on those skills to help me, further examine those issues, whether it's looking at data, what is the data telling me? Do I see any trends? What is the story, or what story isn't being told? Having that lens and the skill to be able to view that, I think, has been helpful, as well as the qualitative piece. We do a lot of interviews at GAO or looking through literature. And again, having the skill set to be able to ask good questions, powerful questions, to the different folks that we're interviewing, I think is a great skill set. And I think that class definitely set me up for success. And is also related to one of the other areas that we look for in GAO, that critical thinking, your ability to look at, particular areas and, dive down further into what is the real issue, what is going on here. What other clients do we need to talk to, or organizations do we need to talk to, other data we need to look at. And so being able to look at things through a critical lens, applying skepticism, further examination, I think are all things that we do here at GAO. And so I definitely love that class. And to Jose's point around the people piece, I think that it wasn't a specific class, but being able to work with your colleagues. We did a lot of groups within my PPIA. And so in GAO, that's also reflected in the work that we do. We have project teams that look at specific issues. And so being able to work with others, I think Jose highlighted the importance of being able to communicate, being able to write, but those are all skills. I think that PPIA did an excellent job at providing that foundation for for me to excel at GAO.
Thanks, Ashanta. And I was joking with someone the other day from my PPIA cohort that sometimes I feel like I'm still in PPIA at GAO, just now I'm getting paid, right? Now that's my job. But yes, we still work in teams, right? We still are learning. Definitely training is huge at GAO, but that foundation that we're getting to work on these issues that we're really genuinely interested in, these really important policy issues. So thank you all for sharing about what you found helpful from your Junior Summer Institute. And I have one last question before we open it up for Q&A. And being within the DIA space, I'm really curious about this one. I'm wondering if you could please share how you have applied a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility lens as you continue in your career paths at GAO. And Terri, how about you start us off with this one?
Okay, so I could talk, Justine knows I could talk about this forever, so I'm going to watch the time on this. The GAO has truly made a commitment to DEIA. And this started really earnestly with our current Comptroller General, Jean Dodaro, about 7 or 8 years ago, when we were talking about how can we as an agency really meet the needs of our most important resource, which is our people. We don't produce things, like we don't build cars, we don't build houses. What we do is we produce information. And so our people are our most valuable resource at GAO and is the reason we get our mission work done. So there was a lot of research that was done, consultations, and what came across is that it has to come from the top. A commitment to the DEIA has to come from the top. So the agency had already had, its on the mission side, kind of its mantra, which is accountability, integrity, and reliability. That was what we always focused on. And so we decided, you know what, that doesn't say anything about our people. So we have to lay and come up with something that is just as important, which we developed. And I had the fortunate opportunity to be part of that whole process, developed our people values, which to make sure, you know, that people at GAO feel that they are valued, respected, and treated fairly. And that, if you look at the GAO, when you see a lot of the information on GAO, you will see a circle where, you know, the accountability, integrity, and reliability is intermingled with our people values as well. So where I was at the agency at this time is I was managing the agency's entry-level program. So all of the DEIA, you know, focus, the training, the whole commitment of the agency had a huge impact on how I did my career. Because at GAO, when individuals come in, they come in as in a developmental program, which is a 2-year program. And as the hiring official too, you know, there were a lot of things that we were doing unintentionally that were not giving access to different communities. And so one of the first things I did when I came in, at the direction from our executive committee, was we came up with a whole new crediting plan for our hiring processes that really did focus on, we're not trying to hire people who know how to do GAO's work right away. That's not what we're here for. We're hiring people, they have the skill set to be successful and be able to complete the work that we do. And that meant making sure that there was an emphasis on merit principles in our hiring, that things like how a person spoke, how a person presented themselves, what school they came from, those were not the deciding factors in how we hired. And you saw a complete uptick in our talent pool and the individuals in the diversity and the people that we brought in, and just benefited the agency so much. And also in the other piece, you know, like I said, this is a 2-year developmental program. It's also a probationary program where our responsibility is to take that skill set and then show people how to apply it to get our work done. And so we built in that program lots of opportunities to make sure that using those DEIA principles, that we were focusing more on accepting that everybody, the minute they walk in the door, can be successful at GAO. They have the skill set. That's where we start from. And not everybody learns the same or needs the same amount of time. And so that is exactly what the DEIA trained lens, the DEIA training across the whole agency has just built on, you know, in my whole time at GAO, and has made me a better senior executive at this agency, made me be a better program manager in that space that I hold at this agency. So I did a good job, right, Justine, keeping it brief. But like I said, I could talk about this forever and ever. I am a certified DEIA facilitator for the agency, help out with a lot of courses we do. That's how important it is for me personally to be involved in that, regardless of the role and the responsibilities I have at our agency. But, you know, I'm just so thankful that the agency has that focus and allows me to do that as well.
Thank you so much, Terri. And I think, you know, the fact too, Terri, that we get to see you as a managing director, right, at this very high position in GAO, and hear your pathway as someone who came from PPIA is just amazing. And you're definitely a role model for many of us at GAO. All right. And Ashanta, can you share with us about, you know, your DEIA lens as you are on your career path?
Yeah, and I think, you know, as my career path sort of changes, you know, that DEI lens changes in terms of like how I approach it. But when I was a project leader leading these different projects on important topics, I think one of my favorite things was being able to do actual work that included a DEIA focus. One of the last projects I worked on was actually looking at racial disparities in disability claims for veterans. And so that was, work that the Congress was really interested in, particularly with our veterans who serve and then they come back. And then, if they have an injury, they have to apply for disability benefits. And they were really interested in knowing for certain populations, what were barriers for them in terms of accessing disability claims? Were there certain groups, who didn't have as much equal access to others? And so that was a very fascinating job. And it includes looking at data, what is the data telling us, but also talking to veteran service organizations who work closely with veterans, as well as the VA, to get a better sense of, what is happening with this group of veterans who are applying. And so I think that's one way in which, I've applied a DEIA lens with the work. But now that I am a training administrator in our learning center, I still get to apply that DEIA focus. I am a course manager as well as a coach, a professional coach, like within the learning center. And so some of the courses that I teach, there are certainly opportunities to include that DEI perspective. There's one course on critical thinking. So part of that is training the analysts and auditors to perform the work that we do and having that critical lens. But as part of that, we also have to recognize like our own personal biases, that we bring into the work, because a critical aspect of GAO's work is being fact-based and objective. And so being more aware of, how certain situations or upbringing and experiences impact our lens and point of view when we enter into doing GAO work is actually very critical. And so that's one class. But in working with staff at GAO, I think Terri hit the nail on the head in terms of we just have a wealth of diversity at GAO in terms of the different staff, different groups. And so being able to work with individuals at all different levels, different backgrounds, it definitely helps to shape the organization and the work that we do there.
Thank you, Ashanta. All right, Jose, how about you? If you can share about your DIA lens.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Terri and Ashanta, for sharing, your experiences on shaping GAO's commitment to applying DIA principles. Speaking as someone who's been at the agency for just a few months, I've definitely seen that, professional development program analysts have a pretty robust training schedule in their first few months in the program. And I've definitely taken part in several trainings where we learn how to apply DIA principles, not just to our work, but to our interactions with our GAO coworkers and our managers in a sustainable way. I also think that this work reflects, obviously in the mission work that we do. My current engagement is looking at federal tribal agreements to collaboratively manage public lands and waters. This is a sensitive issue. Tribes are historically dispossessed communities and people. And throughout the entire time I've been working on this review, my team has taken, several steps to ensure that any of our interactions with tribes are respectful, are sensitive of their time, of their capacity, and grateful for their opportunity to share their perspectives with us. It also means sometimes meeting communities where they're at. We had the opportunity to travel to Arizona to meet with a number of tribes that their reservations are in Arizona, including Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribe, and be able to meet with them face to face to get their perspectives on this issue when working with the federal government. I think that's an example of how GAO is taking this work seriously, and I certainly see it for myself in just my first few months at the agency.
So much, Jose, for sharing that. And I think it's really great too how we are very cognizant, right, of how we go and interact as part of the federal government with different communities. And so we have over a dozen courses at GAO where people can think about DIA as a skill set, right? Something to practice not only as someone who is working in a team environment, and needing to make sure that we are being inclusive of everyone on our teams, but then also when we go out and we do this work and we interact with others, making sure we're using that inclusive language. And I think sometimes we get questions about what is it like to be nonpartisan, where there's so much happening in the world. And I think some of the benefit of being in a nonpartisan agency, we have a PPIA alum who's a director who is leading a climate change portfolio, right? We get to stick to the facts. And so I think there's huge benefits for being able to bring our experiences to keep our DIA lens as PPIA alumni into GAO and into the work that we do. And I know we are running out of time, Saran, but I see that there are some questions already here. So I will go ahead and stop there. And thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to you, Saran.
Yeah, no, we're actually right on time. So no worries. And I do see folks joining in. Again, for those who joined when the webinar was in full session already, my name is Saran Sidime. I am the Communications and Outreach Manager with PPIA. And we are going to go ahead and move to our Q&A. I see that there was a question that came in while folks were chatting. Nicole wants to thank you all for your time and is wondering if you have any insight into how GAO is similar and different to the Congressional Research Service, which she knows uses information, that Congress uses information. So that's for any of you to go ahead and pick up.
Justine, do you want me to start answering that one?
Sure.
Yeah. So how we're similar, like Justine said in the beginning, the Congressional Research Service is part of the legislative branch, similar to how GAO is part of the legislative branch. There's some very major differences, though, in how the two work. The Congressional Research Service is a very vital organization to the Congress, in that when they are asking for answers to help them draft legislation, have hearings, things like that, they can contact them and get a very quick turnaround on information that they ask for. And that is what CRS will do. They will provide direct requests from the Congress, information in a very short amount of time in most cases. But what the CRS does is they pull that information from existing studies, existing reports primarily. The difference with GAO is that we get requests directly from Congress that most likely, and most of them have what we call researchable questions related to them that in many cases are not connected to previous studies and previous reports. Like, it's something that we have to figure out. Where do we find the answer for Congress? What's the best path for getting that information? And in general, our information is going to take longer than the information that CRS can turn around, because we're doing original research. We are going out and kicking the tires. Jose mentioned making those field trips. We are gathering information, and we are then packaging it up into either a testimony or report for the Congress. So, and we do have that ability where CRS does not, to actually go out and what we call kicking the tires, doing that field visits, doing that site visits, collecting that information. And in the process, we keep our clients informed the whole time in the progress of our work, and before we finish that final report. So I hope that answered your question, but that's kind of a non-complicated way of talking about the major differences between the two.
Thanks. And Ashanta, did you have something?
Yeah, and I think I was just going to add, we do work closely with CRS too. Like when we start our work, oftentimes because they've looked at existing research, they are very critical in terms of just informing our understanding of an issue and where might be information sources that we can locate, that we can build upon. And so they're a sister organization, and we do coordinate closely. And oftentimes that is the starting point, like for our engagements, to go out and do some of that field work that Terri is talking about, doing the site visits, or we also create our own surveys. You know, that's another component that we do, which CRS, they don't do that component. And so that's another way in which we are different. We do some of our original audit work ourselves internally.
And I see there's another question about how other federal agencies respond to our reports, especially if you are suggesting, or we are suggesting, improvements. That's a great question. And so, like I said, we stick to our facts, right? Maybe I'll just share, give a little background, and then open it up to the panelists. We stick to our facts. We do what we call a statement of facts, and we actually share our recommendations with the agencies before we publish them, to give them a chance to make sure that everything, again, that we're saying is factual, to make sure that, you know, there is criteria, we say condition, criteria, cause and effect for each of our recommendations that we are providing to Congress. And then they can either, you know, concur, which they mostly do, the majority of the time they concur with our recommendation after we've, you know, had some coordination and back and forth. And then, you know, we keep track of how many of our recommendations are actually implemented by these federal agencies. And you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically it is over 80% of our recommendations are implemented. And we follow up to make sure, you know, has there been any changes? We also do matters to Congress. And so that's a recommendation to even, you know, change the law. So it works for federal agencies and then also for Congress. But I want to open it up to any other thoughts on our recommendations.
Well, I'll just add, you know, there's kind of this, we have this internal saying where we're like, we're here to help. You know, we work in partnership with the executive branch agencies. We're here to help. Now, whether or not they feel like we're there to help, in most cases, there could be differences depending on the things that we're looking at. But I really do believe in, and this is why when I said previously, GAO hires generalists. Like, we don't necessarily, and we hire individuals from all backgrounds, all disciplines. A large percentage of ours have public policy backgrounds, but we'll also hire liberal arts, engineering, you know, just following all the disciplines, because essentially we're looking for people who, like I said, have the ability to think, communicate, both orally and written, and manage time. You know, I think if you talk to any GAO person, they tell you things are constantly moving. What you think your day is going to be on that day doesn't end up being that way. You have to answer different questions or do different things. And so the value we add to the agencies is sometimes they're so close at looking at an issue or a problem that they don't see some other perspectives, or they don't see something that is right there. And so that's a lot of the work that we do, and why we say, hey, we're here to help. You guys are the experts. We're going to listen to you. We're going to take your data. This is why we work so closely with them. And what Justine said, we have like what we call this exit conference, where we say, this is what we're reporting. This is your chance to tell us whether or not you disagree with everything, even though we've worked with you through it. So we've got really good relationships with a lot of the executive branch agencies, but we also know we create work for them when we show up. So we appreciate that. We respect that as well. So,
Terri, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I can echo what Terri said, and just that VA example that I mentioned. they, with the racial disparities, with the disability benefits, the agency hadn't taken a view or a comprehensive review of like what was actually going on the ground with veterans. And so when we revealed our findings to them, it was almost it was a helpful insight, like, oh, wow, there are disparities. Like, we didn't know these existed. And so in that instance, they were really motivated, to start to, take action to start to address some of those disparities. And in fact, they're doing their own comprehensive study to look at, some of the issues that we noted further. So oftentimes it is a starting ground for them to even start to dig deeper into issues, that they may or may not have been aware of. But we really do try to make sure, that our recommendations are useful. And noting places where actual improvements, are worth it and they could benefit from them.
Right. And I see another question here. And to what extent do we feel that being in a nonpartisan agency ever helps or conflicts with our personal, social, political beliefs?
Yeah, I'd like to start there. I think independent of my personal, social, or political beliefs, I'm really proud to work for GAO because they take these central priorities of being fact-based and nonpartisan really seriously. And what that means is that when we come out with a report, the recommendations in that report, the findings in that report are taken seriously by a wide variety of institutions and decision makers. And that ultimately helps make the federal government a little bit more responsive to the American people and deliver better services to the American people. And I think that's really important, again, independent of what I may personally believe or any other employee may personally believe. So I think to answer the question, I think it neither helps nor conflicts, but I think that's a good thing because I think the mission of the agency is really, really important the way that it's designed.
I'll add to that too and say, in my 34-year career, where I'm like, I wish I could go and work for this organization because this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. And you have to be careful about that. You have to be careful, and especially with just the increase in social media, that's something that we have to be careful about as well, because the last thing we want is to have some really good impactful report that's later put into question because I, as an individual, worked on that report and they saw something that could have been perceived as partisan later on. But at GAO, it's okay to have those things that are important to us. It's okay to have those things that we feel important about. And you can still participate, any federal worker can socially and in certain things. You just have some additional guidelines on there. But at GAO also, if there's something that you truly feel you cannot personally, for whatever reason, divest yourself from, you can have the option of saying, I really don't think it's a good thing for me to work on this engagement. And there's opportunities to work on different things. Like for me, any jobs dealing with undocumented workers and stuff, my family history and stuff, I just stayed away from them because that's another aspect too. The agency always asks when you finish one engagement, you get to choose things that you're interested in, put in your preference choices and things like that. Just because an individual at GAO is working on something that is important to them, we've shown you can be non-biased, you can be fact-based, you can be non-political, still work on that. And if you feel like you have a conflict, you report it and you're not asked to work on that engagement.
And I think internally, we just have a set of standards that we have to abide by that sort of help with, us being objective and really fact-based. And so oftentimes that will guide our work. So if there are any conflicts that you have, like Terri was saying, and you don't think you can do that work, then do it in a factual way, objective way, then there is sort of that out. But I think internally, just to make sure we are, representing the information correctly, that's where we have standards in place and others internally that go behind our work to make sure our facts line up, that we're absolutely using solid criteria when we're making our assessments and judgments about a certain deficiency or a certain issue that might emerge. It won't be Ashanta's perspective, but based on this set of criteria, best practices, legal wise, if there's a law that says that agencies should do something, or agency policy, something very sturdy that we can have as criteria to then hold up as the shield against which we make our judgments against in our conclusions and recommendations.
We have a few more questions, including from Ramona. I see your hand up. So this next one is, since we've talked about, or Terri has shared how GAO has become more inclusive in our hiring process and more focused on applicant skill sets, what is the skill set that GAO is looking for in applicants, and how do we recommend applicants work towards building this skill set? And maybe Jose, if you want to share your perspective as, recently going through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think, first of all, I think there's no two identical successful GAO applicants. People come from a variety of different backgrounds, educational backgrounds, career backgrounds. I came from grad school. I know some of my peers in the professional development program come from undergrad, right? That's a different age group as well. So, I would say, first of all, the first thing I'll say is, if you're interested in GAO, apply, shoot your shot. And, I think what can make you a better applicant is having those kinds of experiences that kind of align with the work that GAO does. So any kind of research experience, any kind of coursework that involves research, writing, presentation, I think will support your application. One last thing I'll say is, and this is a little bit out of left field, it's not just about GAO, it's about applying to the federal government in general, is that the USA Jobs process is, I experienced it, sometimes a little tricky to navigate. And the sooner you become acquainted with that, and perhaps have someone you can ask questions to, whether that's through PPIA or through your school's career office or someone else who has been through that process, the better. I'll share very briefly, right? I had a difficult experience at first navigating USA Jobs, figuring out what was required to submit to show that I had certain, credentials, so on and so forth. But that didn't discourage me from applying again, and ended up receiving the internship offer at GAO, and that led to me working at GAO today. So I think, whatever you can do that aligns with the work that GAO does, but also recognizing that there's no one set path to being a successful applicant, and then becoming acquainted with USA Jobs is super important to have a more smooth application experience.
Thanks, Jose. And I'm glad you said that, because the next webinar in this series is how to navigate USA Jobs with Michelle Wong, who is on here, a PPIA alumna and GAO, and she has helped many of us navigate that process. Any other thoughts, Terri or Ashanta? Move on to our next question.
Yeah, I'll just say, and I mentioned them before, the most important thing, skill set to build, is problem solving. If you can take courses that help you with problem solving, I think that is the most important thing that is going to help you build how you communicate, how you think, how you write. The second thing is, working in groups. If you come work at GAO, you are never alone. We have very high quality assurance procedures. And, even at my level, I can't do anything, say anything, whatever, without other people reviewing what I do. And that's not a bad thing, because the result of that is that everybody in GAO, from the comptroller all the way down, stands behind every bit of work that's produced in this agency, because we all follow those procedures. It can be tedious, but they are also really great learning things, really great environment to work in. So that skill set, communicating, the knowing how to look at problems, how to come up with solutions, look at things differently, and then also being able to communicate that in writing and orally in a way that's succinct and clear. That's really important too, because when you think about who our client is, they're busy people. They want to know what is the bottom line up front and how can you tell me everything I need to know in an efficient way. So those are my suggestions.
All right. Our next question is, how does your day-to-day work at GAO balance different types of research? So qualitative, quantitative, statistical analysis. And I will quickly share that my last team that I led, we had policy analysts, we had 2 economists, we had a statistician, but we also did focus groups. And so a lot of times, because we are multidisciplinary teams, we are doing all of it, right? We are doing the qualitative and the quantitative analysis, and we have those various skill sets and disciplines working together to inform Congress. But any thoughts or any examples that you all want to share about what does our day-to-day work look like?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ashanta. Okay, happy to. I think a lot of like your day-to-day is shaped by your engagement, the current review that you're working on. So my current engagement looking at federal tribal agreements is very qualitative. We're looking at a lot of federal contracts and documents and memorandums of understanding that are, kind of jargony, but don't have a lot of numbers. So it's a lot of just like closely reading these legal documents, these like policy manuals, agency handbooks, and kind of drawing relevant information from that. In my internship, during my internship, the review I was working on CARES Act funding, that was a lot of reviewing budgets, funding documents, uses of funding, published in territory, end of fiscal year reports. It was a more holistic, qualitative and quantitative type of work. So I think it really depends. I will also just echo what Justine said in that no matter what kind of work you're doing as part of your engagement, you have support from your managers, from statisticians, from communications analysts that are there to support you, answer any questions you may have. If you have a roadblock as far as a particular method you need to figure out to be able to answer a question, there are folks available to help you get through that and be able to deliver good information to Congress.
Thanks, Jose. Ashanta, do you want to add?
No, I mean, I would totally agree with Jose. It just depends on the project that you're being asked to do and sort of the research question that Congress wants to know more about. Sometimes like with the VA job and looking at racial disparities, that was a data specific job. Like, what is the data telling us about disparities? But I've been on other jobs. There was a higher ed job looking at the accreditation process. And so that one was really driven by a review of existing literature out there. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the strengths of the current higher education process in terms of protecting students? And then it was also an opportunity to get together an expert panel, to talk about some of the pros and cons and what could be done in this particular space. And I think that's the beauty of GAO's work. We have at our hands the ability to use different types of methodologies, whether it's an expert panel, whether it's surveys, whether it's a data analysis, whether it's site visits, and we get to do our own audit work. I think that's something that's different and unique, and we have access to those individuals, even within the federal agencies, to be able to collect that information.
And Justine, the only thing I'll add here is like, I know sometimes I've talked to potential applicants at GAO and they're like, oh, I really want to work for GAO, but I'll never apply because I've only taken one statistics course, or I don't know how to do quantitative methods. You do not have to. You know, GAO has a separate team that helps with, you know, developing surveys, doing quantitative analysis. We hire specialists for that. But the majority, like I said, that we hire are generalists, and we hire from all backgrounds. We will teach you how to do the work that gets the mission work done. So don't feel like I don't fit in because I don't have this certain skill. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for generalists. Yeah.
That's a great point, Terri. And I think, you know, anyone who's made it through the Junior Summer Institute, we say we know enough, right, to be dangerous. We know enough to communicate with our statisticians, or, you know, communicate with those, and like Terri said, on our applied research and methodology team. They're often, you know, running the analysis, but to know, you know, what it is that we are looking for, what type of research do we want to be done. So that's a really, really great point. And Ramon, I see your hand has been up, and I see your question in the chat here. So, you know, on the West Coast in Los Angeles, wanting to know how much involvement or how it's being addressed, the immigration dilemma many states are facing in the Southwest, and the impact that it's creating with migrant workers, in wondering about, you know, Congress and its stance. And I think, you know, I'll just say, I used to be on our Homeland and Security and Justice team, and this is a big portfolio of work that GAO has done. So definitely suggest, you know, that you look at our GAO reports on this area and see, you know, the recommendations that we've made for this body of work, because it's a huge topic that we're continuously looking at. Yeah, anyone else want to chime in on this one? All right. Yeah, again, you know, definitely check out the reports. All right.
Yeah, I would just say, Justine, I mean, it covers a range of issues, you know, so definitely check out the reports from like border security. There's also been stuff like on human trafficking, you know, that's recently come out. So we have a great deal of work in that particular area that might be of interest.
All right. And another question about telework options and office locations in offices, specifically in the state of California. I am so happy you asked this question. Yeah, we have two, as Terri just pointed out, in California. I am in one of them, our Oakland field office. And we also have a Los Angeles field office. You know, we're still like many other federal agencies and just organizations in general, thinking about the future of work. But currently, you know, most of us are still teleworking or working remotely. We have a number of people who love to go in to headquarters or into their respective field offices. But currently, I think most of us are teleworking. We have offices across the country. There's Seattle on the West Coast. We have Seattle, Oakland, and Los Angeles. We also have Denver. I know there's folks here in Texas. We have Dallas. We also have Huntsville, Alabama, Chicago, Dayton, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia. And then on the East Coast, we of course have Washington, D.C., our headquarters, but we also have Boston, as well as our Norfolk, Virginia office. So that is one of the great benefits. I started in headquarters and then I returned. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, so I returned by transferring through Terri's program, the field operations program, so I could be back with my family in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have another question here. Great question. If we wanted to go visit an office, could we? And the answer is yes. We have PPIA offices or visits to some of our offices. I know specifically in our Oakland field office, we host the Berkeley Junior Summer Institute. But reach out to us, reach out to any other PPIA alum that you know. we're always happy to, meet our fellow PPIA alumni, and we can work on getting a visit if you're ever in one of our locations. Anyone else have any question? Oh, yes. Okay. Do we have what other questions do folks have?
These have been great questions so far.
Yes, keep
Yeah.
them coming. And Ramon, I saw your question. I want to make sure, see your hand's still up. Do you have another question? If you could put it in the chat, or sorry, in the Q&A, that would be great. It might have been that one question. Well, oh, yes. Okay. Got it. All right. So that was Ramon's question that we answered. So we have another one about, do you need a graduate degree to be considered? And the answer is no. We have a number of individuals who come straight from undergrad into our professional development program. One of my favorite bosses, she was my assistant director, was a big proponent of going straight from undergrad to GAO. She had an amazing career, is now retired and still, really a proponent of this. So yeah, you do not.
I do like to always tell people that the Comptroller General himself, who has which is unusual to be a congressionally appointed head of an agency, he worked his way up to that congressional appointment being in GAO. And he came to the agency with an undergraduate degree, not a graduate degree. So we all know there are graduate programs and opportunities out there. I mean, undergraduate programs and opportunities that have so many things to offer. And we do hire individuals and recruit individuals with undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees, law degrees. Like I said, we hire across many, many different disciplines and degrees.
Thanks, Terri. And another question about timing of applications. How and when can we apply? Jose shared, USA Jobs is the place to go in terms of timing. I think this is unique for federal opportunities, right? Versus some of the other opportunities that PPIA alumni might have in the private sector, or even at other public sector agencies. We are very tied to the budget. If you all, aren't aware, we have what we call a continuing resolution. We are waiting to see if the budget is passed just next month. We're about a week out. So we're still waiting to hear on that, but sign up for alerts in USA Jobs. Also be in contact with your career folks at your junior summer institute, universities, because we are partnering with them to make sure that they get the information when we have job announcements, especially for that professional development program, but also for internships, because those happen throughout the year. We have spring interns, fall interns, summer interns. We have opportunities all the time. And we got a question here, about when someone is working on their degree. We have a number of interns and even full-time employees who are enrolled in graduate degree programs. So definitely, again, put those USA Job alerts on. But other thoughts from our panelists about applications?
So I'm wondering if the question is asking about PPIA, not GAO, but
Yeah. And oh, sorry. Thank you, Terri. I'm happy to respond to the PPIA questions. Someone asking about how you can apply for PPIA. So this conversation with GAO is really helping, those PPIA alumni, those interested in PPIA, early career professionals thinking about internship fellowships opportunities outside of the Junior Summer Institute, which is a specific PPIA program. And I'll put my email in the chat for those who are interested to contact me directly or visit our website, ppiaprogram.org, to learn more about PPIA specific programs. And I think we have another question in the chat about preparing community college students since PPIA is geared for rising juniors. I think this is a little bit of a misconception. So PPIA as an organization serves as a resource for students who are interested in careers in public service and international affairs. Our Junior Summer Institute is a program specifically geared for rising juniors. But these webinars are for everybody. And speaking of which, we are having a GAO webinar again, a USA job. So I recommend that you all, and when is that again, Justine, our webinar with the USA jobs one? I'll find it.
Yeah, it is coming up very soon. So
Very
I can
soon.
give you the specific date and time here. So it is going to be on March 7th.
There you go.
From 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And that is with Michelle Wong, our application and USA Jobs extraordinaire, and then also PPIA alumni who have recently gone through the process.
Yes. And to the question about whether or not you need to be an undergrad junior to be able to do the JSI, you have to have at least one semester left to complete after the JSI summer. So you have to have one full semester. And again, I would refer folks to our PPIA website for that. I think, Justine, there's a question if recent graduates can apply. I think folks are joining later on if can apply for jobs, potential jobs at the GAO.
Yes, yeah. And so in addition to the internships that we have, again, opportunities throughout the year, I think our main program is our professional development program. This is how I came to GAO. Like Terri said, it's the first 2 years. It's a rotational program. But Jose, do you want to share a little bit about the program and what your experience has been like?
Absolutely. So yeah, I think it's a great introduction to work at GAO and a career in the civil service, as a civil servant rather. So the way that my experiences with PDP, Professional Development Program, has been is you begin at GAO, you're placed with a team, you work with that team for roughly 6 to 8 months, and you rotate to another team. And on that first rotation, your second team, you get to submit your preferences for the particular mission teams that you're interested in working for. So you may have heard us say throughout this webinar, natural resources and environment, homeland security and justice, education, workforce, strategic issues. These are the examples of the different mission teams across GAO, where through the PDP program, you can submit your preferences for to be able to work in. And you'll do that up to 3 times. You'll rotate 2 times in total. And then at the conclusion of the program, you get the opportunity to permanently place into a mission team, and you're no longer in the professional development program. So far, it's been a really great experience. I'm still in my first rotation, my first engagement. And throughout the program, you are able to take part in trainings where you get to meet folks, your cohort that started in around the same time as you. And it's a great way to meet other folks that are closer to you in experience and in time of joining the agency, and kind of, be part of that culture at GAO.
So Justine, I have to add, just because of my role, some of the best things about the PDP program. First of all, and thank you, Jose, for that, because you covered that perfectly. But I would be remiss in talking about the performance piece and the compensation piece of the PDP program. In general, GAO employees get performance-based compensation on an annual basis. The agency made the decision over 10 years ago, we're not going to do that. We are going to go on a 6-month performance-based compensation model with our entry-level employees, because we don't want them to worry about competing with other employees, worrying about how well they're doing, any of those things. So in all honesty, every 3 months, the PDP gets an assessment in the sense of not getting a formal rating or pay, just to see how they're doing. Do there need to be any adjustments to the program? Do we need to provide them additional resources? Then every 6 months, there is that formal rating so that they know how they're doing in the program. And every PDPer, as long as they are performing at the minimum level of sustained in the sense of how they're doing in the agency, they're going to get about a 7% pay increase. And that happens 4 times throughout your time in the program. And once again, we don't say, oh, if somebody's performing exceptionally, they're going to get more pay than somebody, because that goes back to that aspect of not everybody learns the same, not everybody moves at the same speed. We want you to focus on how to do the work, how to apply your skill set, so that once you're out in the PDP program, you can hit the ground running and just work on any engagement as a generalist. So that's another big focus of the program. And the last thing I'll say is, you do not have to come straight out of an undergrad or graduate program to be in PDP. I, in my time, have hired individuals, have spent 5 to 10 years at another federal agency, and they just wanted to join GAO and learned more about GAO and applied undergrad. They come in at the entry level and then work their way up through the agency. You know, or I've hired people who have reached retirement age and said, I've retired from this executive branch agency. Now I want to come work for GAO, and they've joined us as entry level. So like I said, it's a big mix of different individuals. Like Jose, I think you mentioned, not every entry level experience, hiring experience is the same. We have a lot of diversity there.
Okay, thanks, Terri. So that is our professional development program. And international students, do international students qualify for these jobs? So it depends. We do have some dual citizen. So you have to be a US citizen, but we do have some dual citizen employees at GAO. Right. And Saran,
I just shared that link with everyone. So if you all want to go ahead and follow that.
thanks so much.
Yes, I think that we are getting ready to wrap up our webinar. But before that, I just want to see again if there's just a last minute question that someone might have there. I want to thank our panelists, and of course, Justine, for moderating our panel. Terri, Jose, Ashanta, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experiences with us and the folks who joined us. And this recording will be available for later on if you all want to go and rewatch it, you know, for reference. But we will go ahead and share that recording with you all soon. And join us again in 2 weeks. We'll have another panel. We have a White House Fellowship panel coming up. And I'm actually going to go ahead and put that link in the chat for folks who want to register for our next ones. But thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. And we will wrap up our panel here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank
you.
you.